Hello.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, I
Okay.
can now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're adjusting the volume. We're so happy you're here with us. We were just all chatting, and we're going to give Brooke a minute to let everybody else in. Were you
That's
able
good.
to do? You have to invite them in. You have to invite everybody on screen. Now. Yeah. So
Can you guys see me well and stuff?
I'm sorry. What?
Can you see me well? Yeah.
We can. We're just trying to get everybody else that's tuned in virtually. Okay.
Yes, I think they're good.
Okay. To make sure that they're on. So okay, now we're ready. So this is our group, and actually most of these people are part of the book club that they read your book. We have a Lark meeting in the morning once a month, and the Owl book club meeting in the evening once a month. So, but the two clubs read the same book each month, but we just wanted to give our customers a time, the early birds a chance, and the ones who want to stay out later a chance. But welcome to Lark and Owl Booksellers, Lorena Hughes. Thank you for coming straight
Thank you
from your
guys
living
for
room.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you guys.
Oh, we're happy you're here. So, I have met most of you, and you all know this bookstore, it sounds like, very well. So, I don't need to do my spiel really that I normally do, except maybe for the people online. Welcome to Lark and Owl Booksellers. We can't wait to see you in person. But we have been so supported by this community since the day we opened. And especially the last 2 years, we would not still be here without y'all. I kid you not. So thank you from the bottoms of our hearts. And with great authors like Lorena who are willing to spend their time figuring out technology from their homes and join us. So we've had some really nice author sessions over the last 2 years. So Lorena Hughes, most of you know, is the award-winning author of The Spanish Daughter, as well as The Sisters of Alameda Street. She's born and raised in Ecuador and moved to the United States when she was 18. Her previous work has won first place at the 2011 Southwest Writers International Contest in the historical fiction category, earned an honorable mention at the 2012 Soul Making Keats Literary Competition, and placed quarterfinalist in the 2014 Amazon Breakout Novel Award. Named one of 9 rising Latina authors you don't want to miss by Hip Latina, she's the coordinator of the University of New Mexico Writers Conference. So welcome. And all of the competitions have to have long names, so they always do. So just a little bit about how, if you haven't joined us for one of these programs, kind of the flow of it is it we have some questions to ask the author. We want some engagement. We ask some of you for questions, and then there'll be time for another question and answer at the end if you think of something that you didn't already submit to us. And then we'll have a little rapid fire fun question thing at the end, and then we'll go. And as Christina and our greeters told you when you came in, you're welcome to get up and get a drink or something at the bistro. We have a bistro inside our store, so you can get a cocktail while you're here. Okay, so Lorena, everybody here has read the book. So, where did you get the idea for the story?
Okay, so I would say that there's 3 different aspects of what inspired this story. One is the historical aspect, the second one is what inspired the plot, and the third one is like the personal stories. So when I talk about the historical part of it, I would say the first thing that came to mind was the setting, and it was because I'm, as you guys know, I'm from Ecuador, but I didn't know that there was a little Eiffel Tower there because I've said this before, I wasn't big on history growing up. But I found out there was an Eiffel Tower, and I was like, "What? Is there an Eiffel Tower here?" So I went and dig around and found out that there had been in the 19th century, in the late 19th century, a group of French entrepreneurs who had traveled to Ecuador, and they had bought land there, and we're exporting cacao beans all over the world. And so for about a decade, Ecuador became the top exporting country of cacao beans in the world. So that I kind of knew that from history classes, but I didn't know that there was an Eiffel Tower. So what happened was the French were and established in this little town called Vinces, whereas where all the plantations are, and it's up north of the Guayas River, which if you guys read the book, you'd know that it's called Arriba Cacao. And so I that was the first part of my inspiration. I was like, I want to set it there because it sounds really interesting and fascinating. The other thing was upon like when I was trying to figure out what the story was going to be about, I came across the list of different women the inventors. And so I was intrigued when I saw that one of them was a Spanish woman who had allegedly patented the one of the cacao bean roasters in 1847. And I thought that was fascinating. And I thought, okay, so that's Spanish. So there's that in common. And I thought maybe I can have, maybe this could be her story. But I wanted it to set it in Ecuador because I'm from there, and there's not a whole lot written about Ecuador. So I was determined to set it there, but it didn't add up because that was much earlier. So I that's when I came up with the idea. Well, maybe she can be her mom or her grandmother, and the grandmother fit better time for my timeline. So that was how the setting brought me that to that. The other thing was when I was researching about Spanish, the women inventors, I saw that a lot of them had to patent their inventions through their husbands. And I had always loved cross dressing stories in fiction because I just thought it was kind of fun, like, ooh, is she going to get caught? And so I knew I had to write something like that. And so it kind of all just kind of started fitting together. So setting came first. As far as plot, so I have watched a lot of soap operas in my life. So even when I was a little girl, I was always playing like my Barbie dolls. I was not playing mom and dad, and I was playing like this dramatic stories and betrayal and murder, and so I was like, okay. So I kind of inspired in a couple of soap operas I saw. One was a Chilean one called Pampa Ilusión, which is a woman who pretends to be a man, and but for a different reason, and it's set in Chile in the early 20th century, and I really like that. That was really like one of my favorite soap operas. And then another one I saw was about this man coming. This was a Mexican one, and this was this man coming to get an inheritance. And well, because it was set in the 80s, they put drugs on his suitcase or something, and he went to prison. And so it was a little bit different, but I thought, okay, I got the idea there. Like maybe they did something to her when she was coming. And so that's kind of like how the plot came about. And then, of course, I know a lot of families that fight over inheritances. And so I thought, unfortunately, that's very common. And so I thought, well, and I've always liked mysteries and stuff. So I thought, what if all the family members are fighting over it? That would be great. And so that's kind of how the idea.
So one of our questions is, did you write the story in order? We have a lot of writers in our community, and we always get lots of process questions when we ask the community to send in questions. So we want to hear about that, Lorena.
Yes, I mostly write in order. Sometimes, though, I have to step away a little bit and really think about each person's story separately. And so, but I mostly write in order because I have an outline that I use first. So that's to really think about how I'm going to organize the whole plot. And so,
do you know how it's going to end? Do you know how it's going to end when you start?
Most of the times, but not always. Sometimes I struggle with endings a little bit, but in this case, I kind of knew because history held me because the plagues happened. So I knew that, and that's why I said it in 1920 because I wanted it to be at the end of the bonanza, and so the cacao bonanza, and so I knew that it was not going to end well for everybody.
Yeah. And who are your favorite characters in the novel? Did anyone you had an affinity for specifically?
I really like Martin, and especially now because in the sequel he's important. So I've gotten to know him a lot more. I also like
Mm,
Alberto the priest because
yeah.
I think he's very complex, and Puri, of course, she's my because I like what she does. I like her. She's kind of fun and does a lot of unexpected things. So I like her too, and she has a really good heart. So
So some people went, oh, they didn't know that you have a sequel coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yes, I'm so excited about the sequel. Um, it is set in Colombia in 1925, so it's 5 years after the Spanish Daughter, and Puri. Well, since you guys already everybody knows the ending, right? Like I don't want to give it any spoilers. So Puri has to go find Martin in Colombia, and so it's the mystery of. And so I don't know if you guys remember that in the first novel, I mentioned that he studied in Colombia, his high school and college years. So we will meet some of the people that he met then, and um, so it's kind of like a new cast. But I do have four characters from the first book. But it's set so the setting is in Cali, which is in south of Colombia in El Valle del Cauca, and it's during an earthquake that happened in 1925. So the historic event is real, and so basically that's kind of what it is about. And she will use a different disguise this time. I've
Why
been
did you
telling
want
what
to?
what's that?
Why did Why did you want to do a sequel?
Actually, that
What,
was my editor's idea. Like to me,
ah,
the story ended, but when we were trying to negotiate the contract, my agent said, they're really interested in it, but they really want to make it like a series or at least have a sequel. And at first I thought, well, I don't know. The story's pretty much over, I thought. But then a few days later, I started thinking and I was like, well, if there was going to be a sequel, what would it be? And it just kind of started growing from there.
so a couple of other questions about some plot points. Were any of the fictional? Well, you sort of answered this about the real places, the Eiffel Tower, and some other. Are there other places in the book that were you got inspired by real locations?
Yes. So I went to Guayaquil, which is the biggest city in Ecuador. I'm not from there. I'm from Quito, the capital. But Guayaquil is the biggest city and it's a big port. And so I went there. And so the places I described there, like the neighborhood where the lawyer lives, Las Peñas exists, and I love it. And I posted some pictures of it on my Facebook and Instagram, so you guys can look at it. And so there's this historic park in Guayaquil that has a replica of the haciendas in Vinces. So the cool thing is, I didn't know that when I went to visit first, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this would be a great setting for a story." But I didn't realize that it was actually a hacienda that had been in Vinces. It was a replica of a hacienda there. So I found out that later. So it was really cool. What other places? All the rivers, the Sevilla, of course. Although I don't have scenes in there anymore. I did in a first draft, but yeah. So I think that's about it. The Invades, of course, the town.
Yeah. So we Misty and I went to a conference in Denver. Yeah, pull up a chair. Come on in. And Lorena was one of the speakers at one of the evenings there, and then we got to meet her, and we were very charmed by her. Obviously, am I remembering correctly that your great grandmother was an influence in the story as well, or your grandmother? Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, family members of mine, I grab here and there from different people,
Yeah.
but um, the sequel has a lot about my grandparents because my grandparents are Arab immigrants in Latin America, and so I do have some Palestinian characters in the sequel. that are inspired greatly by my grandfather and my grandmother. So that one has a little bit more. This one, there was a little bit of stuff I got from family, but not one person in particular. Like I borrowed little different things from different people.
And so, what kind of research did you do for this book, but also for the sequel? Was it kind of a similar thread, or did you take a whole different turn on this for the sequel?
The sequel has been a little bit different because with COVID, I had to do a lot of online research, most of it. Whereas with the first novel, I had the opportunity to go. Well, I went to Guayaquil and I interviewed a chocolatier. I interviewed a priest who is a friend of mine from college. Um, who else did I interview? It was a lot of watching videos about chocolate making, and I also have a family member who does that. Yeah, I sacrificed a lot of hours. I also researched cactus because how Angelica has a cactus, and so I spent hours watching cactus online, and they're so cute, and they can speak, and they're divas, and they cuss, and they're just like that was really fun. The other thing that I should mention that was a little bit of an inspiration from history is, Catalina and how she has that alleged vision of the Virgin Mary. So
Yes.
that was something. So in Ecuador, when I was a teenager, there was a girl, but in a different town, who said that she saw the Virgin. And so there was a lot of, like, the whole country was watching her, and it was in the 80s, so of course it was televised, and she led a pilgrimage through a mountain, and that mountain is now a very touristic place in Ecuador. And so I saw the documentary of when that happened. I went to that place actually in person too. So yeah, a lot of the stuff I got to experience firsthand. With this second novel, I've had to research a lot. I have a friend who's from that area of Colombia, and I sat her down and she talked to me for 4 hours. And I recorded the conversation and I asked her everything about it. And then, but I've had to research a lot. And it's been a little bit challenging because there's not a lot online about Colombia in the early 20th century because I used two timelines too, also in the sequel. So the one timeline is when Martin was in high school, and so with all his friends and enemies, and that was in 1909, and then the present is 1925, and so I've had to research a lot about transportation in particular, how it worked out, and so it's been a little bit different, but it's fun.
And did you do any research for the character who does the cross dressing and how? I mean, how did you? You said you were always interested in that as a topic, but how did you find out more about that?
Well, I read a memoir of this woman who I think it was about in the early 2000s. She's a journalist, and she wrote a memoir called Self-Made Man, and she actually dressed up as a man for a year and a half of her life, and she wanted to it was a research for her, and she wanted to experience what it was like to be a man. And so she went to like she first joined this bowling league that was all men, and she dated, she went to a seminary pretending to be a man, and it's really interesting. And so I got a lot of information from that, like what it would feel like, like how she was, the poor woman by the end of the memoir, I think she ended up having a nervous breakdown because and that's what made it to me make it a little more realistic, than in fiction, because it is very stressful, and and she had a lot of guilt to be deceiving people, because then in the end she was liking those people a lot, those men that she met, and she felt really bad. But they all reacted really well when she told them she was a woman, and they're like they actually became really good friends of hers and stuff. So that's what like mostly. But I also read a lot about because a lot of women in the past did it to go to war or do different things like that. So I read a little bit about the women who did that in the past, and I wrote an article about it. I can send you the link if you guys are interested.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, I think people would like to read that. And so, a question from one of our book club members. What do you feel the significance was of all the children and others fighting so hard for the plantation and their inheritance, only to have the cacao plants die in the end and be useless essentially to the children?
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand with what I consider to be the theme of the book. And I mean, I don't want to be like tell people what to get from the book, but to me, it was an issue of what matters more, your family or the inheritance. And so in the end, they all kind of, hey, nobody gets it. And I don't know. I just see a lot of that in real life. A lot of people fighting over things like that with family members and never speaking to each other again. So this was kind of my way of, I don't know, like expressing how I think that family is more important to me at least, than that.
That's great. Um, so, some people wanted to know what's one of the best or some of the best things about being a published author.
Seeing readers like yourselves. I love that. And today, a woman from Ecuador wrote me um, an email, and she said that she has lived in the United States for 32 years, and she was so excited to find a book that was set in her town because she's from Guayaquil, and she said she was so happy and she loved it, and so that's really rewarding. The other thing, of course, it's fun to see your words in print, and the cover is really fun, and it's just exciting.
That's great. We have another question from one of the book club members here from Lauren, who's here this evening. How do you feel each of the characters' physical spaces played into their character development? For example, Don Armand's office, Martine's home, the main living areas for Angelica, Julia, Elise.
How did their Could you repeat the question, please?
How do their physical spaces that they inhabit play a part in developing the character for you?
Well, to picture them, that so that I can make so that they could come to life to me. So, like, I imagined Don Armand having this crowded office with his gramophone, listening to the French anthem, and like drinking when he's upset about something. Like, I just could just picture them and their settings a little bit. And actually, Martine's house is inspired by a restaurant I went in the town where I told you guys that lady that saw the virgin, that girl that saw the virgin. Yeah. So I went to this hacienda to have lunch, and it's like that. So it's really cool. I have all these pictures of it, and it just helps for me to get into the frame of mind of what everybody would be like, what everything would look like to them.
Yeah. So can you tell us? Can you tell? So you do a lot of work in the writing communities. Are you teaching now? Is that what you're doing? Are you teaching?
No, so pre-COVID, I organized the University of New Mexico Writers Conference. So what it is, it's a day conference that we bring in editors, agents, and writers, and most of the editors and agents are from New York. And so we have panels and workshops, and also the opportunity for writers to pitch their projects for 10 minutes to the editor or agent of their choice. And there's food. It's a whole day event. It's really fun. And I I got it. I before organizing it, I used to go myself, and I went for years. And then I met the people who organized it, and eventually the person that was in charge of it wanted to retire, and so she told me, "Do you want to take charge? Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Sure." I knew it very well because I had been going since 2007.
Mhm.
So, and I've
That
met
how you,
some great friends there. Yes.
is that how you met your agent, or you found your agent through that conference?
No.
Do you want
No.
to say a little bit about that process?
Of my agent.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's I don't know. Are you guys writers?
There are some writers in the audience, yes.
Well, I I have had three literary agents, and
Mm.
yeah, and I found most of them through the traditional route, just cold querying. I sent out. I've sent to like I must have sent like 200 query letters, all
You don't,
overall.
don't give up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't give up.
yeah, right.
For my first agent, I know I sent 120, and I had no connection to her whatsoever. The second one was referred to by a friend, a writer friend, who's here. I see her name in there. and and then the third one, I also knew from a writer friend. I mean, I didn't know her, but I had heard, like, I knew she was her agent, and so um, I just sent her a query letter, filled out the form, and she requested the full manuscript, and then she made the offer. But it does take a long time and dedication and a lot of rewrites and revision, but I think it pays off. You just have to continue at it, persevere. Because, like, one of the things I did is if I got a rejection letter, the next day I would send a letter to someone else.
Mm.
That's one of the things, like one of the rules I had, because then, I wouldn't be depressed about it. I'd be looking forward to hear from the new agent, right?
Yeah, yeah. Does anybody have a question for Lorena? Did you think of something while we were chatting? Yes,
Well, someone might have asked this because I came late, but
that's okay.
I also have the last name Hughes, and you mentioned your Palestinian grandparents, and I wondered where the name Hughes came from, presumably not from them.
Hughes,
Did you
Hughes
hear that, Lorena?
my husband, Mr. Hughes.
There we go.
If I had used my Palestinian last name, I don't think anybody could have said it. Like, even in Ecuador, people don't know how to pronounce it. I don't even pronounce it right. Because I've met uh, Palestinian people who told me, "Yeah, you don't pronounce it right. You put a Spanish accent to it." So I have to ask random strangers how my last name is pronounced. But so yeah, so I decided to use my husband's name because it's so much easier, especially because I write in English. So I thought it would just be easier and save everybody the heartache of saying my last name.
Well, it sounds good with Lorena too. Lorena Hughes, that's a nice name. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Anybody else have a question? Christina, do you have any? Hello. Christina's our book buyer. She's in the back, and she leads one of the book club sessions. So, did you have anything you wanted to? I'm putting you on the spot. I realize it. Yeah. Well, you can think about it. We can come back to it. So, Lorena, what are you working on now?
The sequel,
Oh,
I
I thought. I'm sorry. I thought the sequel was finished.
well, it was. I thought, but I was wrong. But I am actually enjoying it a lot because I think my editors were right. Like, I had the first draft ready, they read it, and then we've had a meeting about it, and they sent me an editorial letter, and so I am basically rewriting the beginning, but not just the beginning, like a big chunk of the opening of the book, and
Yeah.
we're changing the focus a little bit, and I am actually liking it better now than the previous version. So I'm working on that a lot. Before I got my editorial letter, in the meantime, while I was waiting between the first draft and my edits, I was revising a novel, my second novel that I wrote. That is the first one that was agented. That is historical fiction. also, but it's set on the Galapagos Islands in the 19th century because a lot of people know the Galapagos Islands, but they think they just know the animal the biology side of it. And I wanted but the human history is fascinating because I won't tell you much, but there's a lot of mysteries in there that have happened. People disappeared. Like it seems like whenever someone wanted to take advantage of the animals and make it their own empire, something bad would happen. So there's this man that wrote a book called The Curse of the Turtle because every time someone tried to go there, they would die or like something would happen to them. But so I had an idea a few years ago about a story there, and so I've been editing that one because I think it needs quite a bit of work. But I was working on that one in the meantime. So I'm but now I set it aside because the sequel to this book is more important right now to complete.
Mhm. That's great. Who are you reading? Who do you? What's interesting to you now, or what do you have on your nightstand that you reading?
Okay, so I've been obsessed with domestic thrillers. Just
Ooh,
because it's different, and I don't have to think about history. Um, so I've been reading Lisa Jewell a lot. Like I read like 5 of her books in a row because they're so dark. A lot darker than the stuff I could ever write. So I like to see someone else do it. But because I'm now writing a book set in Colombia, and I needed to immerse myself in the atmosphere and everything, I'm reading Garcia Marquez.
Mm,
So I'm reading this novel called, I'm sure you guys know of it, Chronicles of a Death Foretold.
mm,
I'm reading it in Spanish because I want to get, he's really good with language. Um, he's what we consider very literary, but I don't know. In translation, it's kind of weird. So I'm reading his book in Spanish, and it's actually helping me a lot with my own uh, book that I'm writing. Like it's giving me all these ideas because he's so like you start reading that book and you already know where it's at. He's so good
mm.
about it, and that's so I want to emulate that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we have a lot of interest here in the bookstore in mysteries and thrillers. And so what we added this past month is a book club that's called Murder of Crows. So it's very murdery. And it's full every month. So people love it. Yeah. So it's thrillers, but also true crime. They'll read some true crime in there too. Do you read that genre?
True crime. No, but I watch documentaries of true crime. Yeah,
That's amazing.
I've never got much into the novels, but I love to read I love the documentaries. I watch a bunch of them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I actually get some ideas too about. Like I got an idea from there for the sequel too. Like what do people do with bodies? And so that's it's sad but true. So
So then that's another research path for you then.
it was a little bit for this novel. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. So is there anything, Lorena, that you wish somebody would have said to you early in your writing career and process when you're getting started that you would share that maybe might inspire others?
Mm, well, I'm the kind of writer that sticks to the rules a lot.
Mm,
Like I would read all these manuals about how to write, and then I was very rigid about that stuff. Um, and now I'm seeing that you can experiment a little bit more, and I'm letting myself experiment a little bit more, especially with this new novel that I'm writing. It's breaking some of the rules that people had told me when I first started. Um, so that I think that would be one of the things that comes to the top of my head right now.
mhm. So to go back to the Spanish daughter for just a minute, there's a lot currently happening in our world about gender roles and gender identity and that sort of thing. And you touched on this in a historical novel. So did you have a message you wanted to convey, or something you wanted people to draw from that that relates to our
You know,
time now?
I'm not the kind of writer who likes to be really heavy-handed with messages and be like, this is the way that you guys have to think about things. I like to leave stuff for readers to interpret themselves and decide. I don't know if you guys heard my dog working. um, I thought for sure, because it's historical, those things would be like she would be noticing a lot more stuff than maybe we would, like even wearing pants. And because she would be coming from wearing corsets and things like that. And so uh, riding a horse, she would have been riding sideways, or just the way that people treated women, like not being able to leave her house without going having a chaperone, or having everybody in the house know where she was going to be at. Just things that I saw it more as a historical thing, like how women were expected to behave in the past and versus men. And I would think she would notice those things a lot, because I made her be the kind of woman who kind of tried to defy things in her own way when she was younger. Like she was the one that convinced her husband to open a chocolate store, and the mom was against it. And so I try to make her a little bit of an iconoclast. And so I think she would be noticing those things more than we would at this time, because things have changed so much for us now. So
It looks like we have a question in the question box, Brooke. Let's make sure that we get that person's question. Okay, the question is, do you develop one or more main themes for your books that you keep in mind as you create and write your narrative? So do you have parallel themes? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that in the Spanish daughter, jealousy also plays a big role. And I had it in mind as I was writing, because she's jealous of her sisters. Her sisters are jealous of her. She's jealous of Martin. Like because I think it's very human to feel those things. So a lot of theme comes through naturally. Some things I had to think about. Well, what am I going to say? Because you have to say something by the end of the book. Like there has to be the premise, right? So I do have that thought out. What do I want to say? Like even, in my earlier writing classes, the teachers always said it's really cheesy, but all stories they're trying to say something, right? Like something really cheesy, like good versus, good triumphs, love conquers it all. There's no place like home. Every story has a premise or a theme, and of course, I think about those things. But um, in this case, it was more about family, to me. But there's other stuff, emotions are very universal, and so I think that's what connects us to all the stories that are set in different worlds and different times, is because the emotion is there for all of us. And so
That's great.
those things are
Anybody,
really-
anybody think of another question or comment, or Christina?
You stole my question earlier about what she's reading.
Oh,
I have a question.
oh, Brooke has a question. Okay,
Yeah.
Brooke.
Okay, so in our book club discussions, we found that we were very enthralled by the only character we never got to see, who had passed away, the father, and how he had Furi, and then he had Angelica and Catalina, and then also Elisa, and he just seemed like this elusive guy who had all these daughters. And was that a particular inspiration from someone or history, or if you could just speak about him a little bit?
Yes, Latin American man.
All of them.
I don't want to point fingers here, but I will say that It was really interesting for me in one of my edits of the book. Um, my editor wanted to know more about Puri's parents. And so I started researching, a lot of stuff that was not in the book because, I can make the book a million pages. So I had to cut it down. But I was very interested in how the French, why a Frenchman would go to Spain. And so I started researching that because I was thinking, how would he have met her? And so I started looking at the Sevilla, the Feria de Sevilla, and like just different things. And so there was more story there that I would have liked to tell, but it has to be a different book. And but
Maybe a
um
prequel.
Yes. Yeah.
They're saying yes to the prequel. Yeah.
yeah, that would be super fun.
We have another question from the online audience. Do you consciously use writing techniques such as foreshadowing, echoes, bookended a book, etc., or is that something that critics make up for their reviews?
um I know I have those things in mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, but there has been reviews where people have read more to things that I had intended, but I was like, I'm not going to say anything. I want to say really deep. But I do keep some stuff in mind when I'm writing, and you know what? Actually, that comes a lot in the revision process. It's like, oh, I should move this here, so it's foreshadowing, So I do
Yeah.
keep those things in mind while I'm writing.
That's great. Anybody? Anything bubble up yet? Yes.
We talked about breaking rules. Does she want to say one specific writing rule that she broke?
Any writing rules that you broke or would like to break, or would maybe even suggest new writers break?
Well, I'm currently breaking it, and I don't know if it's going to be accepted by my editor. You know, I was told to keep the reader in the time that the scene is taking place, and never say things like, later I would go back about this and realize that this and this and that, because you kind of have to keep them in the moment, in the present, and not take them out and remind them this is a book. Well, Gabriel Garcia Marquez did it all the time. So if he can do it, why not me? And so I'm doing a little bit of that in this version, like this. I have 3 narrators as well, like in The Spanish Daughter, but one is a man. He's a photographer in the 1920s, and he's kind of telling you a little bit about Martin Asai that you don't know. And so he is saying, like, he's doing that. He's saying, when this and this, like telling you from the present time, looking back a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. So, well, we've got about 15 minutes left. So, think if you have any other questions. And Lorena, is there anything that you don't get asked when you're being interviewed about this book that you want to say?
I'm looking through my notes. Let me see.
That's good.
Well, there was a question about identity and how that you had sent me. Do you have it?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. It's on this piece of paper. So there's a lot in this story about gender roles and identity, and was that the message that you were trying to make? And then there was a second question about Puri being the most obvious the characters seeming to have a true identity they were keeping secret. Do you feel this reflects in real life in any way? So it was kind of several questions about the same topic.
Well, I wanted to mention that, and because I recently read that each one of us is three people. One is the person that you think you are. The second is the person how you think others like how others perceive you, and the third way is the way you think others perceive you. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think that we can use that in storytelling too, because she has an idea of what people think, and then when we go into another point of view character, we see her a little bit different, and so I liked to explore that a bit in that sense.
That's interesting. It's an interesting concept to think about in life too, not just in fiction, right? Yeah. So, toward the end of a lot of interviews I do these rapid fire questions, and I will be honest, I've stolen every single one of them from the Actor Studio interviews from a long ago. If you ever watched those, Brene Brown's early interviews that she used to do with people. And then Kelly Corrigan, who's another writer that I love, she does some great interviews, and now she's on PBS doing that. So I put some together, and when I run out of time or forget to do these, somebody always stops me and says, "Why didn't you do those questions?" So we have time to do them today. So the first one is, Lorena, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt if you could do anything?
Well, as a little girl, I wanted to be an actress in
Mm,
theater, and I always regretted not taking any acting classes in the theater department at my university, but I was too embarrassed. And it's one of those things that I never really did, but I thought it would be fun.
yeah, I bet you'd be good at it. You're very clever. And okay, so the next question is, so if when you're feeling uncertain or fearful, and this is about writing or life or anything, what inspires you to show up? How do you keep showing up?
Um, because it's worse not to, you know? Like if I had been really nervous about this event today, for example, and I said, "Oh, the hell with it, I'm not going," like wouldn't it be worse that I didn't show up? you know? So
That's
I
what life is. Okay, and what is there anything that gets in the way of your creativity? And if so, how do you move through that?
yes, me. Telling myself that this is so stupid and how embarrassing to share this, that sort of thing. And like, why? We have as writers our good and our bad days. And sometimes when we're reading our stuff, we're like, hey, this is great. I'm amazing. And then the next day you may be reading and you're like, ugh, this sucks. So I always in my head. And also I get distracted a lot. And so I need to focus a little bit more. I think everybody's distracted nowadays. Like I hear an email come in and I'm like, what?
Yeah, we're all kind of getting conditioned in ways we didn't predict, I think. What movies or books do you return to again and again? Ones you like to read or watch over and over?
um, so I don't reread books anymore that much. However, I am reading the Chronicle of a Death Foretold. But I used to I actually like kind of funny things, like Where'd You Go, Bernadette? I've read that one a few times, or
Yes.
The Rosie Project, or there's 20s Girl. I really like that one. Like the ones that kind of make me laugh. What Alice Forgot by Leanne Moriarty. I've read those. And then movies, I really like Knives Out.
Oh, wasn't that so good? Have y'all seen that? Knives Out. Knives Out. Oh, it's so good.
That was awesome. I mostly rewatch stuff when I want my husband to watch it. So I'm like, hey, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this next question actually was on. I heard it on the Actor Studio years ago, and Bradley Cooper answered this question. This was way before he got his Oscar nomination or whatever. So the question is, as someone who's accomplished at what they do, how do you get good, and how do you advise others to get good?
Wow, I'm really excited that I got the same question as Bradley Cooper.
We'll tell him if we ever run into him.
Please do. Just by doing, like you get better by doing. You just have to keep at it and keep doing and learning, and like anything with practice, I don't know why it is that with writing people expect to be awesome the first time around, and we don't really think that we have to learn a lot, like I was like, why am I not getting published? This is amazing, like 15 years ago. And then I go back and read it and I'm like, no, it wasn't amazing. So, by learning and practicing and rewriting and rewriting, I think that's when you get better. But you have to keep doing it.
So when you say to keep learning, do you learn by reading other people's work, by submitting your work, short stories or something somewhere, or reading books on writing? Are there any favorite ways you have of learning how to get better?
Well, in writing in particular, I've done all of that. Like at first I read tons of books on how to write. I attended conferences, I did workshops and classes, and then of course now I do more looking at what other writers are doing. Mm-hmm. Now that I have kind of like the basic knowledge of story structure kind of figured out, but I do go back and refresh my memory. Like I just read before I finished revising The Spanish Daughter, I went to read Save the Cat,
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's why Puri helps that old lady when she falls at the beginning. So
writing, yeah. Okay, who do people say you look just like?
So when I was in college, they used to tell me, and I didn't even know who this was, but they used to tell me I looked like Diana Troy from Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, who is that? And that's when and back then there was no internet to be looking her up, right? So I had to go and look at the show, and kind of, I think she's the one that I've been told.
Well, that's nice, yeah.
But I always have people come and tell me, hey, I know a girl that looks just like you, and I never have met that girl.
That's a good one. Okay, what's your least favorite word?
So when I was learning English as a kid, I couldn't say refrigerator. And every time I said it, my English teacher would laugh and ask me to say it again and again. But now I hate to say, okay, so my family always laughs, and I don't know how to say this word well. In Spanish, you say melancolía. In English, I never know if it's melancholy or melancholy. And I have messed up my entire family, and now nobody can say it either. And the other one is, so when I went to a writer's conference once that we had to read our work in front of agents and editors. And I didn't know that we had to do that, and I had never practiced my reading. And so I was reading the novel that I told you guys about, the one in Galapagos. But it starts, actually, the first scene is in church, and she's in Quito, my hometown, and she's in church. And so I was standing there in front of all these editors and agents, and I had never before said the word pew out loud. So I'm staring at it, and I'm like, how on earth do you say this word? So I look up pew, and then I keep reading, and then it was there again, and I was like, why did I write this word so many times? But I don't know how to pronounce that. And so then the next day, because this was like a 3-day conference, I'm walking around and this guy comes up to me and says, "Pew, right?"
Well, it's good
So
you have a good sense of humor then for people.
yeah, I don't like that word.
So you can give us whatever version of this answer that you'd like to, but what's your favorite curse word?
Curse word?
Uh-huh. You can hint at it or say it. Either one. It doesn't matter.
I like to cuss in Spanish.
Yeah.
For some reason, it feels more authentic. Like if I say it in English, I like, why are you offended by that word? So I would say, well, I won't say it, but because my mom may be watching this one day.
Okay. We don't want to cause any family drama. That would be bad. Yeah, that would be bad. And the last question I have is, and this one is also from the Actors Studio. If heaven exists, what would you like for God to say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Come and join your family.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, did anybody think of anything they wanted to? One last question to wrap up with.
Does she have like a rough date of when the sequel might?
Yeah. Do you have a timeline of when the sequel might be out?
I don't know. I really don't. Sometime next year, I'm 23, but I have no idea. At what time.
Well, so is that something you update on your website and your social media when you get a pub date and stuff, so people can follow you there?
Sure. I make sure to do that.
Okay. Well, Lorena, you have an open invitation to come see us anytime you want to. We would love for you to come to Texas and spend some time here at the bookstore with us.
I do want to say something I'm really excited about.
Oh, tell us.
So you guys are the first to know. Today I heard that the Spanish rights of the Spanish Daughter were sold.
Congratulations. Yeah. That's wonderful. Are you excited? Yeah, we're talking. Yeah. Oh, you must be so excited.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm excited because it's also going to be in Arabic, Russian, and Dutch so far. But I'm really excited about the Spanish version of the book. So.
Okay, I have a question about that. When you sell the foreign rights, do you have any weigh in on the covers?
I don't know.
You don't know? Yeah, well, okay, we want to know the answer. So when you find out, let us know. Yeah.
Okay, I will.
Yeah. Well, we can't thank you enough. And I want to thank all of you guys for coming in this evening. For those of you at home, I want to thank Brooke and Christina, our wonderful staff here, who we couldn't do any of this without them. And I want to say thank you to the book clubs, because I think that's just been a great addition to the community here at Lark and Owl. So, and Lorena, you have a good evening there in New Mexico, and really come visit us. We'd love it.
Thank you. Thank you guys for reading the book.
Bye. Bye. Yay.